The Three Voices Within. Mary's Journey to Inner Wisdom. The night sky stretched endlessly above Mary as she sat on her porch swing, gently rocking back and forth. The neighborhood had long since fallen silent, with only the occasional distant sound of a passing car to remind her that the world hadn't completely stopped turning. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, not because of the cool night air, but because of the weight of the decision that had been haunting her for weeks. "Stay or go," she whispered to the stars. The job offer in another city promised growth, adventure, better pay, all the things she thought she wanted. Yet something held her back. Was it fear, wisdom, some kind of inner knowing she couldn't quite name? Mary sighed, frustration welling up inside her. "Why can't I just know what's right?" she asked the empty night. "Because knowing isn't always as simple as we'd like it to be," came a voice from the darkness. Mary startled, nearly falling off the swing. A figure emerged from the garden path, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile that somehow put Mary at ease despite the unexpected intrusion. "I'm sorry to frighten you," the woman said. "I'm Eleanor. I was just passing by and couldn't help but overhear your question." Mary raised an eyebrow, skepticism replacing her initial surprise. "You were just passing by? At 2 a.m? Eleanor laughed, a gentle sound that seemed to lighten the night air. "Let's just say I tend to appear when people are wrestling with the voices within themselves. May I?" She gestured to the empty space on the swing. Against her better judgment, Mary nodded, shifting to make room. There was something about Eleanor that felt trustworthy, almost familiar. "What did you mean by knowing isn't simple?" Mary asked after a moment. "Well," Eleanor began, settling comfortably beside her, "you're trying to decide if you should take this new job, aren't you? And you're confused because different parts of yourself seem to be giving you different answers." Mary's eyes widened. "How did you—" Eleanor smiled. "It's written all over your face, dear. But more importantly, I recognize the question behind the question. You're not just asking whether to take the job. You're asking how to tell the difference between your gut feeling, your intuition, and your conscious inner voice." Mary felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the night air. This stranger had just articulated exactly what had been troubling her. "These three guides within us speak in different ways," Eleanor continued, seemingly unaware of Mary's amazement. "But most of us never learn to tell them apart. Would you like to?" "Yes," Mary said without hesitation. "More than anything." Eleanor looked up at the stars as if consulting them. "Then let's begin with a little adventure, shall we? Close your eyes, Mary." "I'm not sure that's—" "Trust me," Eleanor said gently. "Just for a moment." Reluctantly, Mary closed her eyes. The sounds of the night seemed to grow louder, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, her own heartbeat. "Now, imagine you're standing at a crossroads," Eleanor's voice guided her. "Three paths stretch before you. Each one will take you to one of your inner guides. Which path calls to you first?" Without thinking, Mary pointed to her right. "That one." "Perfect," said Eleanor. "Open your eyes." When Mary did, she gasped. She was no longer on her porch, but standing in a sun-dappled forest clearing. Three paths stretched before her just as Eleanor had described, and Eleanor herself stood beside her, looking not at all surprised by their change in surroundings. "What's happening?" Mary asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're visiting the landscape of your inner world," Eleanor explained calmly. "Don't worry, we're perfectly safe here. It's just easier to meet your guides this way, rather than trying to explain them with words alone." Mary looked around in wonder. So this is inside me? In a manner of speaking, Eleanor nodded. This is the realm where your unconscious and conscious mind meet. Now you chose the right path. Shall we see where it leads? Still stunned, Mary could only nod and follow as Eleanor started down the path she had chosen. The forest grew denser around them, light filtering through the canopy in golden shafts. After walking for what felt like both seconds and hours, they emerged into another clearing. In the center stood a small cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. "This is the home of your first guide," Eleanor said. "Your gut feeling dwells here." As if on cue, the cabin door opened and a figure stepped out, a woman who looked remarkably like Mary herself, except dressed in comfortable clothes with bare feet planted firmly on the earth. She had an easy confidence about her and moved with decisive grace. "Hello, Mary," the woman called out. "I've been expecting you." "You have?" Mary asked, approaching cautiously. "Of course. I'm always trying to get your attention, though you don't always listen." The woman smiled without judgment. "I'm your gut feeling, though some might call me your instinct or your immediate reaction." Mary looked from the woman to Eleanor, confusion evident on her face. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. "Ask her anything you like." What exactly are you?" Mary ventured. The gut feeling laughed, a quick and lively sound. "I'm your body's wisdom, Mary. I'm the collection of all your lived experiences, processed and stored not just in your brain, but in your entire physical being. When you walk into a room and immediately feel uncomfortable without knowing why, that's me. When you get a bad feeling about someone despite their perfect credentials, that's me too." "She speaks quickly," Eleanor added, "before your conscious mind has time to analyze or doubt. That immediacy is her signature." Mary considered this. "So when I think about taking the new job and feel that twist in my stomach, that's me talking," the gut feeling confirmed. "I don't use words, I use sensations. Tightness, lightness, nausea, calm. I speak the language of the body." "But how do I know if I can trust you?" Mary asked, the question that had been troubling her for so long finally finding voice. "Sometimes fear feels the same as warning, doesn't it?" The gut feeling nodded, her expression serious now. "That's an excellent question. I'm quick, but I'm not always right. I can be hijacked by anxiety or past trauma. I'm most reliable when the situation is similar to something you've experienced before, or when there's potential danger." "Your gut feeling is like a trusted animal companion," Eleanor explained. "Sensitive to things your conscious mind might miss, but also prone to false alarms." "How do I tell the difference?" Mary asked. "By getting to know me better," the gut feeling said simply. "And by consulting your other guides when you have time. I'm best at quick decisions and when your safety might be at stake. For more complex life choices, you might want a different perspective." Mary felt a wave of understanding wash over her. "So you're not meant to be my only guide?" "Exactly," the gut feeling smiled. "I'm just one voice in the chorus. Speaking of which." She gestured behind Mary. Mary turned to see another path had appeared, leading out of the clearing in a different direction than they had come. "That leads to your second guide," Eleanor said. "Are you ready to meet them?" Mary nodded, feeling more curious than afraid now. She and Eleanor followed the new path, which wound through the forest in gentle curves rather than the straight line they had walked before. The trees here were older, their trunks massive and roots extending visibly above the ground in complex patterns. The path opened into a much larger clearing dominated by an ancient oak tree. Sitting beneath it was another version of Mary, this one dressed in flowing clothes with intricate patterns. Her eyes were closed in meditation, but they opened as Mary and Eleanor approached. "Welcome," she said, her voice melodious and calm. "I've been feeling that you'd come today." "This is your intuition," Eleanor introduced with a respectful nod to the seated figure. The intuition smiled and patted the ground beside her. "Come, sit with me a while." Mary sat down, feeling an immediate sense of peace. "You feel different from my gut feeling." "I am," the intuition agreed. "While your gut feeling speaks through your body, I speak through patterns and connections. I'm the part of you that sees how things fit together, even when the connections aren't obvious." "Intuition draws on your unconscious mind," Eleanor added, sitting cross-legged on the grass. "It accesses information and patterns you've absorbed without realizing it." "So, you're not just immediate reactions?" Mary asked. The intuition shook her head. "No, I'm deeper and broader than that. I'm why you sometimes wake up with the solution to a problem you couldn't solve the day before. I'm why you can sometimes predict how a story will end halfway through reading it. I notice patterns your conscious mind hasn't yet pieced together." "Do you use feelings too, like my gut feeling does?" "Yes, but different ones," the intuition explained. "I often come as a sense of recognition or resonance, a feeling of rightness or alignment. Sometimes I appear as symbols in dreams or sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere." "She's quieter than your gut feeling," Eleanor noted. "She requires more stillness to hear clearly." Mary thought about this. "Is that why meditation and quiet time help with decision-making?" "Precisely." The intuition smiled approvingly. "When your mind is busy with chattering thoughts or strong emotions, my voice gets drowned out. I need space and quiet to be heard." "And for the job decision?" Mary asked hesitantly. The intuition's eyes seemed to look through Mary rather than at her. "I've been sending you signs for weeks. The recurring dream about birds flying free, the way you felt when you read the job description. That sense of, this is for me, that seemed to come from a deeper place than excitement. The coincidences that kept bringing the opportunity back to your attention." Mary's eyes widened as she recognized the truth in these words. She had experienced all of those things but hadn't connected them. "But like your gut feeling, I have limitations," the intuition continued. "I can see patterns and possibilities that your conscious mind misses, but I don't analyze or plan the steps to get there. And sometimes what feels like intuition can actually be wishful thinking or projection." "So how do I tell when it's really you speaking?" The intuition smiled. "True intuition has a calmness to it, a quiet certainty rather than an emotional charge. It persists and often grows stronger with time rather than fading. And it usually doesn't come with an agenda or wishful thinking attached." Mary nodded, absorbing this. "So you're more reliable for complex decisions than my gut feeling, but you still have blind spots." "Everyone has blind spots," the intuition agreed. "That's why your third guide is so important. Speaking of whom," she gestured to a stone archway that had appeared among the trees. "Your conscious inner voice awaits," Eleanor said, rising to her feet. "Shall we?" Mary nodded, thanking her intuition before following Eleanor through the archway. This path was different still, paved with smooth stones and lined with lanterns that cast a clear, steady light. It led them to a circular library with walls of books, reaching toward a glass dome ceiling that revealed a starry sky. In the center sat a third version of Mary, surrounded by open books, maps, and what looked like scientific instruments. She looked up and smiled warmly. "Right on schedule," she said, her voice clear and articulate. "I've been preparing for our conversation." "Your conscious inner voice," Eleanor introduced. "Please, have a seat," the inner voice offered, gesturing to comfortable chairs Mary hadn't noticed before. "I imagine you have questions." Mary sat down, looking around in wonder at the vast collection of books. "Are these all my memories?" "These are your conscious knowledge, experiences, and reasoning abilities," the inner voice corrected. "Everything you've learned and consciously processed throughout your life. While your gut feeling speaks through physical sensations and your intuition through patterns and quiet knowing, I speak through words, analysis, and deliberate thought," she continued. "I'm the voice you hear when you talk to yourself, when you weigh pros and cons, when you analyze a situation logically." "You sound the most familiar to me," Mary observed. The inner voice smiled. "That's because modern society tends to value my kind of knowing above all others. Logical reasoning, critical thinking, analysis, these are the tools I use, and they're highly respected in your world." "Are you more reliable than the others?" Mary asked. "Not necessarily," the inner voice said thoughtfully. "I have different strengths and weaknesses. I'm excellent at breaking down complex problems, analyzing information you've consciously gathered, and testing assumptions. I can help you plan step by step and think through logical consequences." She gestured to a nearby desk where a pros and cons list for Mary's job decision lay open. "I've been working on this for weeks, weighing factors like financial stability, growth potential, distance from family, and alignment with your long-term goals." "But you have blind spots too," Eleanor prompted gently. The inner voice nodded, adjusting her glasses. "Indeed, I can only work with information you consciously possess. I'm vulnerable to cognitive biases and logical fallacies. I can get caught in overthinking and rumination, and I'm often completely blind to emotional and physical wisdom that hasn't been translated into words." Mary leaned forward, finally seeing the full picture. "So, each of you has different strengths and weaknesses. None of you is always right or always wrong." "Precisely," the inner voice agreed. "We're designed to work together, not compete for your attention." Eleanor, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Think of them as three wise counselors, each with different expertise. For any important decision, it's best to consult all three." "But how do I integrate your different perspectives?" Mary asked, looking at her conscious inner voice. "Sometimes you contradict each other." The inner voice smiled. "That's where something greater than any of us comes in, your whole self, which encompasses all three voices and more." "Your whole self isn't just the sum of these three guides," Eleanor added. "It includes your values, your sense of purpose, your connections to others, and your deeper wisdom." Mary was silent for a moment, taking it all in. "So for my job decision?" "Listen to what each guide has to say," Eleanor suggested. "Your gut feeling might tell you about your immediate physical and emotional response to the idea. Your intuition might reveal patterns and possibilities you haven't consciously recognized. And your conscious inner voice can help you analyze practical considerations and alignment with your stated goals. And when they disagree, that's when your whole self needs to weigh which voice is most relevant to this particular decision," Eleanor said. "Is this a situation where immediate danger sensing is crucial? Then perhaps trust your gut feeling more. Is it a complex situation with many subtle patterns? Your intuition might have the edge. Is it something requiring careful analysis of known factors? Your conscious inner voice might be most helpful. Mary felt a sense of clarity beginning to dawn. I think I understand now. But how do I take this understanding back to my real life? Eleanor smiled. You're ready to return now, I think. Close your eyes, Mary. Mary did as instructed, feeling a gentle spinning sensation. When you open them again, Eleanor's voice continued, sounding farther away, you'll be back on your porch. But you'll remember everything you've learned here, and you'll be able to recognize each guide's voice more clearly. Will I see you again? Mary asked. I'm always around when people are learning to listen to their inner wisdom, Eleanor's voice replied, now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. But for now, it's time to wake up. Remember, your gut feeling speaks through physical sensations, your intuition through patterns and quiet knowing, and your conscious inner voice through words and analysis. All three have wisdom to offer. Thank you, Mary whispered, feeling a cool breeze against her face. Open your eyes now, Mary. Mary opened her eyes to find herself back on her porch swing. The night was just as quiet as before, the stars just as bright. For a moment she wondered if she had fallen asleep and dreamed the whole encounter, but the clarity she felt was too real, the understanding too profound. She took a deep breath and turned her attention inward, listening in a new way to what each of her guides had to say about the job offer. Her gut feeling responded with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy, not a warning, but the natural physical response to a significant change. Her intuition offered a sense of alignment, bringing to her awareness how this opportunity connected to patterns of growth and purpose she'd been sensing for months. Her conscious inner voice presented the practical considerations, the financial implications, the logistics of moving, the professional opportunities. For the first time, Mary didn't feel torn between these perspectives, but saw how they complemented each other. Together, they were painting a complete picture that no single voice could provide alone. She smiled, rocking gently on the swing. The decision wasn't made yet. She would give it the time and reflection it deserved. But something had shifted. She now had a way to listen to all parts of herself with discernment rather than confusion. As she looked up at the stars one last time before heading inside, Mary whispered a thank you to Eleanor, wherever she might be. Then she rose, feeling more whole and integrated than she had in a very long time. Her last thought before she drifted off to sleep that night was a realization. The wisdom she had been seeking had been within her all along, not in any single inner voice, but in learning to listen to them all, and recognizing when each one had the wisdom she needed. As you listen to Mary's story, perhaps you're wondering about your own inner guides, your gut feeling that speaks through physical sensations, your intuition that reveals patterns and connections, and your conscious inner voice that analyzes and plans. Perhaps you're recognizing times when you've heard each one clearly, or times when they've seemed to contradict each other. As you drift toward sleep, may you carry with you the gentle reminder that all three have wisdom to offer, and that your whole self encompasses them all.